The following audio-supported podcast is intended for informational and educational purposes only and is not intended as medical advice. Please speak to a healthcare professional before making any treatment decisions. The guests on today's show were paid to participate in this podcast.
Hey Thal Pals, it's your fellow patient advocate NinaMaria, and you're listening to Thal Pals, the Alpha Beta Revolution. Today's episode is all surrounding culture. I think a lot of us might be familiar with that. Thal spans across many cultures and, within that many ethnicities, regions, religions, which all have their own beautiful subcultures and traditions, and also that carry their own stigma around Thal. Specifically, the struggles around Thal. And something that I've noticed is that people with Thal are some of the strongest, and that we're able to not just break these barriers, but shatter them. And so with me today, I have some very wonderful guests that are fellow Thal patients. And I just want to say it feels so good to just be sitting with Thal family. I think there's a special connection with that. And let's just go around and let you guys introduce yourself. Let us know what type of Thal you have and your ethnic background. Ralph, do you want to start?
So I'm Ralph Colasanti. I have beta Thal intermediate, which is now transfusion-dependent thalassemia, and I'm Italian.
Hi, my name is Radhika Sawh, and I have beta thalassemia major, and I am of Indian descent, Punjabi.
Hello, Erick Phyakeo. I have alpha thalassemia, hemoglobin H, and I am Southeast Asian, Laotian, Vietnamese, and Chinese.
Agios is a biopharmaceutical company that's fueled by connections with patient communities, healthcare professionals, partners, and each other. Building on these connections and the company's unmatched leadership in PK activation, Agios is pioneering therapies for rare blood disorders, including PK deficiency, thalassemia, and sickle cell disease. To learn more about thalassemia, visit rethinkthalassemia.com. To join the conversation with other patient allies, follow us on Instagram at Ally Voices Rising. That's Ally, A-L-L-Y, Voices Rising.
I think I want to start just by being a little bit vulnerable and sharing what specific stigma that each of you has struggled with that are relevant to your own culture. And how have you kind of overcome that barrier?
Want me to start? I'll start. Okay. So I'm also probably the oldest on this couch right now. So I was diagnosed back in the 60s. And, growing up, it was just because I looked different and everything. And in an Italian household, it wasn't really talked about, right? I was just known that everybody knew I was just sick, or that's how they treated me. And it was very hush-hush. But my mom was looking for something. She was looking for a cure or something to beat the odds. And so she was very vocal, even though it didn't please the grandparents or, other people in the family. She was vocal about getting me help and looking for a place to, where I could at least grow past the ages that they were diagnosing us as, right? So we didn't talk much about it in the house, other than it was just me and my mom would always talk about it, and, like I said, growing up, it was just the friends you surrounded yourself with. If you had decent enough friends, I would tell them, or they would know that I was sick. They really didn't know what it was or what path I had to take, but we were just kids, right? We were playing in the street, riding our bikes, scraping our knees, but I looked different, so I got picked on a lot, and I got bullied, and, people made fun of me, but I've always had good enough friends and family support where, they had my back, so I'm blessed in that manner. But, the stigma was the stigma. You didn't come out and say, hey, I have thalassemia. It was kind of like, I always think of that episodes, like on sitcoms when they, everything was whispered, like, she has cancer. Like, my grandmother would be like that, like, well, he has Colasanti. It wouldn't be like, something. So it wasn't wasn't talked about like we talk about it today. And I know Radhika's story is much better than mine.
Well, let's hear.
I wouldn't say it's much better, but there are definitely similarities to what you went through. My parents did not talk about it either. So very, very few people knew about my diagnosis, and that was truly limited to my mom's parents, so my maternal grandparents, and my mom's sister, who was a doctor, who was kind of helpful in getting me aligned to the right doctors, and her family. Outside of that, no one else knew. No friends, none of my dad's family, and no school teachers, no administrators. No one knew. My dad came here to the States in the 60s when only about less than 300 Indians were allowed in. So, it was during civil rights and all that, and he just didn't want to make any waves. He wanted to be accepted, and he already knew he was different. So the last thing he needed was a child with illness. And so that was part of the reason here. And also, I was born in the 70s. So in the 80s, we had the AIDS epidemic, and there was a lot of fear concerning blood. And for those who may remember the Ryan White story, that he was not allowed to go to school once people found out he was HIV positive, my father realized that if people knew I was getting blood transfusions, they would make that leap, even though it wasn't true, and I might be barred from school. So he said no one needed to know. And in terms of family, my mom's side was more educated. They went to school and college and all that. My dad's side, less so. And he was really concerned, probably based on his experiences growing up, that if they knew I had an illness, they would ostracize me and they would not want to be around me. There'd be fears that it would be catching, So he's like, they don't need to know. So for years, that's how I lived. No friends knew. And it was isolating. I couldn't share what I was going through with anyone. I didn't know any other patients until I was in my teens and I moved to New York. So it took a while. And even when I got married, my aunt told my mom I wouldn't tell them. What if they don't want to allow this marriage to happen? And my mom's like, no, I'd rather not have that because I don't want them later on she get a divorce because they find out stuff. So it was a big leap of faith to share my story with my intended husband and his family. And the great thing is, though, from there, I found a lot of acceptance, and it gave me the strength to now share my story and be more open about it. But it was a very scary thing to tell people when you grew up saying, no, don't tell anybody. They might not want to talk to you. They might not want to be around you, and they may ostracize you. And it was all because of the stigma about a disease that people just had never heard of. And because of fears around people who need blood transfusions and HIV, AIDS, and all that. So,
Absolutely. Thank you.
My story is a little similar to yours. Growing up, we didn't really talk about it. It was me and my sister because we have the same alpha thalassemia. So it was just us. None of our friends knew. It was just really quiet. We didn't really think about it. We just dealt with it, and especially back then, it wasn't common at all. Like I would go to school, I would go to physical education, but I couldn't run, and people would ask why, and my teachers would ask what's wrong with you, and they wouldn't understand. And it was just uncommon that they didn't really hear about thalassemia. So growing up, it was the stigmata was real. It was there. We didn't really talk about it. We just kept it to ourselves, my sister and I. My sister passed away already, but I'm here for her. So, just growing up, it was just, I felt a little secluded from I guess, with the world and stuff. I felt like I was going through it kind of by myself. I had support with my family and everything else, but it was just, they're there to a certain extent, and I'm the one that's going through it. And then it's just getting up every day and doing it. And just, it was a battle. Just for myself and just not letting anybody else know because I don't want people to think I was weak or different,
Yeah, yes.
I didn't want people to think that I was less than them, and I wouldn't want them. And I really kept it in, So like it was just kind of a big thing on my heart, like ever since I'm 40 now. So it's like it's been here. It's going to be here forever. So, but the whole thing, I just kept it in. It was just I'll deal with it. When I get sick, I'll be gone. My friends were like, "Oh, where'd you go?" I'm like, "Oh no, I just I got sick. That's it." I wouldn't tell them I got blood transfusions because they'll just keep on asking questions, and plus I didn't want them to think less of me. That was like the big thing for when I was growing up and everything else. I mean, until now, I mean, I still don't really open up to people because I don't want that feeling. That feeling again. But yeah, it was tough though. But other than that, it was good. I mean, I dealt with it. I'm here now, so
We're glad.
yeah, I'm glad I'm here too.
I have to say one thing. When you were talking about gym class, that used to be the bane of my existence, is they didn't know. And they'd say, "Come on, you're not trying." I'm like, "Trying not to have a heart attack here. My count is very low. You can't make me run." And they didn't know. And years later, I actually befriended a gym teacher, and she was my daughter's gym teacher. And she used to come to our clinic to do like, what was it? Scrapbooking, just like a thing she would do. And so she met me, and she's like, "Wait a minute, I know you." And I'm like, "Yeah, you know my daughter." And we got to talking, and she got to learn about thalassemia. And I told her, I said, "You're the first gym teacher I've ever liked." I have this trauma with gym teachers. And I told her my story, and she's like, "Oh my God." She's like, "I never even thought of that when a child was struggling, to think that maybe there's something going on with them health-wise." And she's like, she said, "I apologize on behalf of all the gym teachers you ever dealt with for forcing you to do something and not thinking that, or asking the questions like, is there something else going on?" And I said, "Yeah." And she's like, "They should have you should have told them." I said, "I wish I could have, but I was under a gag order by my parents not to." But
So,
I
I mean, I think that hits home with all of us because I had that same struggle. And like I literally, in grade school, I remember I was not allowed to do sit-ups because my spleen was so enlarged. I couldn't do a sit-up anyway, but my spleen was, when it came out, it was 6 pounds. But
God.
it was so enlarged that I couldn't do a sit-up. So I would always like not get a good grade in gym, and it'd be, I'd have A's, and then
That's so funny. Yeah.
penmanship and gym were always like, took a note. My mother had to bring in a note from my doctor, from my pediatrician and my hematologist, saying he's got to be excused from doing certain activities at gym. So now that kind of puts you, back even further. Like you said, you don't want people
differently, right?
you don't want people to think you're weak. That's what makes us, I think, makes us so tough, is because we always fight, so that we could keep up. Always fighting so that we could, be one of, the group.
Don't want to be
Not picked last for gym. I was already picked last for gym.
And I was excused for gym for 6 weeks, and I was in heaven. I'm like, "This is great." And they're like, "You have to write a report." All my friends are like, "Oh, that's terrible. You have to write a report." I'm like, "I'll write a report every time if I could just get out of gym class." But yeah, it's interesting.
I think there's something to say about that. Like, though this stigmas may vary where they're rooted in, we've all experienced, and hearing your guys' stories, like, it gives me chills because it feels like you're speaking memories out of my brain. There's this barrier, this stuckness between, not feeling like you can't share and also not being heard and not being understood. I think, I'm curious to know, when you finally were able to tell it a gym teacher years later, what did it feel like to be heard by her and understood finally?
It almost, I think, brought tears to my eyes when she was like, "I'm so sorry," because she got it, and it made me think, wow, if I had only just said something, if I'd only had the strength to speak up. But there's just that fear. Like, what if she didn't understand? What if she went the other way, going, "You shouldn't even be here. Why are you in the school? Why are you mixed with other kids?" Or like you were saying, if she said, "Well, you just can't do it. You're just obviously very weak." So you don't know which direction they're going to go. So it's nice when you get that empathy. It's not compassion. It's empathy.
And it's not pity.
And it's not pity. And I agree with you that you never wanted someone to say, "Oh, I feel so bad for you." It's like, no, this is my life. You should be like, I'm empowered by how you can, and this is your experience. We all have struggles, but I appreciate why you may have different struggles than I do, and we'll work together to make it better for all of us.
Absolutely. And Ralph, you touched on something that kind of stood out to me, that Thal patients are so strong. And I hear you say it all the time, and it rings so true that like we are some of the strongest people. And you kind of connected that to the stigmas that surround us. What do you think that relationship is, that impact?
Well, I think, like, I always say that we're strong people because we overcome a lot, right? And stigma, I think, to me was one of the biggest. Like, growing up, I didn't know it was stigma. I was just being quiet about what I had, and when I was being made fun of or whatever, you were just taught to either fight or flee. So, a lot of times I fled, and there were a few times when I had to fight. And it wasn't really until I tell a story, and I may have heard it before, but when I used to go to the Boys and Girls Club after school, because that was the after school program, right? And I was waiting for my turn to play pool, and the kid just jumped in front of me. They would always call me Pig Nose because the way my nose was shaped and the face. But she's like, Pig Nose, it's not your turn. And I was like, yes, it is. So, he's like, we were getting into it, and I was like, I just sat down. And so my mother witnessed the whole thing because she had come to pick me up. And she said, okay, Pig Nose, let's go. It's time to go home. And I just looked at her, and I was like, I never really backed down from anything since then. What my mother did probably would get me taken away from her nowadays. But, she made me who I am, and that's just the way I feel about it. That's why I think we're strong. It wasn't, we got to work harder just to get out of bed in the morning. We got to work harder to live our lives and get through that 9-to-5 job we have or whatever the situation is, whether it's school, whether it's work. So we got to work harder just to do that, on top of all the other stuff that comes with having thalassemia, like making sure your appointments are scheduled, making sure you're taking your medicine on time, making sure, you get your yearly exams done complete, there's a lot that goes and nowadays it's easy. I feel it's easier because I put everything in my phone and just, have it. But back then it was my day runner, it was my, planner, and it was on the calendar at home and on the calendar. So we're tough. We really are tough people. And the other thing is, because our perception is that we don't want to be weaker, we always work harder. That's, I think, what we do is I think we overcompensate because we know, not that we lack, but we know we don't have that energy. So we kind of just go to the next step and kind of say, you could do that, I could do it better, or I could do it longer, or I could do it faster, which I never could do faster because I was always last. But
do you think we also overcompensate because we don't know what our time span is, so we want to make every moment count?
And because of that, we want to get the most out of the time that we have. And I think that's something beautiful that really everyone should,
embrace.
Yeah, exactly. Erick, you had mentioned about how, your family was a good support system, but it always still felt a little isolating because you were the only one going through what you were going through. And I think I could say that we all have shared that feeling of isolation. When did you meet another Thal patient that you could share with, and what was that like?
That was recently with, I went to I think it was Alpha Beta workshop. That was the first time I actually shared or met other thalassemia patients besides my sister. So that was a really big life-changing for me. I think I've been waiting for that moment to meet other thalassemia patients. That's why I feel so kind of not alone, but just isolated just by myself because nobody else really knows what's really going on. My parents know about thalassemia, but they're not really into they know what thalassemia is, but not really how it affects me as much, But yeah, I mean, meeting other thalassemia patients, it was life-changing, very therapeutic. It actually it was to my heart, it was to meet everybody that's similar to me, I felt joy, I felt happiness, like I felt like our hearts connected, or like we're connecting together. It was overwhelming, but it was a good experience. Yeah, it was.
Now you have 3 more people.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I'm actually floored that we haven't met you earlier, because I guess the Alpha Beta was at the thing that took place in San Francisco area. That's what Agios is doing for us. They're bringing people that we haven't known about together, and that's just awesome.
It is.
I mean, the foundation's here. The foundation.
Mm-hmm.
Make sure you come. You got a big family you don't know about.
Yes,
And it's so important for us to know and connect with other people who get it.
Mm-hmm.
Because our families can, empathize and they try.
Mm-hmm.
But unless you've been the person whose count is low and you're just trying to get up a flight of stairs and, or your head is hurting, or there's just the feeling we get,
Mm-hmm.
just feeling like I just want to be normal. And I hate to use that word, but I just want to wake up not thinking about this stuff and realizing that there's someone that you could call or reach out to saying, having one of those days, and you're like, talk.
Yeah,
I get
exactly.
it.
Mm.
I get it. So
There's something so special. And like you said, it's almost like an instant connection that you feel when you meet someone with Thal. It's like instant family.
Yep.
There's something about them that like they get a piece of you that no one else has ever gotten.
Yes.
And Radhika, I'd love to hear your story about, when it was the first time you ever met a patient. You talked about, your childhood, also very isolating, having to shelter that. When did that happen for you, and what was that moment like?
So I moved to New York when I was 14, and I went to I met my hematologist, and I found out he treated other patients. And when I went to the hospital, I ended up meeting a woman who was 15 years older than me who had thalassemia. And I'm 14 at the time, and I'm thinking, all I know about thalassemia is that you don't live really beyond your teenage years. So how much longer am I here for? I have no idea. And I meet someone who not only has thalassemia, but is almost 30 and is married and is working. And I'm like, it's like my mind couldn't comprehend it. Like, you mean you can actually survive and have what seems to be the regular life that everybody else has? Like, because that just never was something I even thought about. I mean, I have parents who never talked. They wanted me to do well in school for the sake of doing well in school, but they never talked to me about career choices because they didn't want to pressure me with that. They were one of the only parents who weren't like already planning my wedding and talking about grandkids because they didn't think that was even feasible. So I had parents who never made plans for me because they were too scared to, because they didn't think I'd be around that long. So to meet someone who's actually, doing well and living their life as if, yes, going for transfusions, but outside of that, doing the things everybody else did was just life-changing. Because I was like, oh, I should make plans. I should try and not be so, so overly cautious. Like my parents were like, they didn't plan. I started too. And it gave me hope. And I think it's not that they didn't want to be hopeful. They were too scared to be hopeful. Because like you, I lost a sibling. Mm-hmm. And they lost my brother 3 months before I was born. And he was 7.5. So every day I lived was beyond 7.5 was just a gift. They didn't expect it. So why would I think I would live any longer? So to see that no, I could. So this patient's still alive today. So I always say, I know I have I feel like I have at least that long, and hopefully longer. But but it definitely gave me a very good perspective. And then I met other patients who were similar age to me that I could relate to about, oh, so what did you tell your friends about what excuse do you have? Mm-hmm. Apparently all my friends thought I had really bad teeth because I kept saying, oh, I have to go to the dentist after school. Because I didn't want to say I have to go for blood. So I was like, well, that's the most benign thing I could think of. Or my mom's dragging me to her friend's house, or I have to go somewhere. But it was always the dentist. So
that's funny.
Yeah, but I have to say, meeting people older than you or even your age group just gives you just this Like you said, it's an instant bond, but it also gives you goals, and it gives you perspective, and it gives you hope, which I think is so important, especially for the younger generation, to see that, you know what, this doesn't have to be life limiting.
Yep. It's so important to empower
Exactly.
our youth. And I think that the connection and seeing others like you succeeding and thriving,
Yes.
there's so much strength in that.
Thriving is the word. She was thriving, and I was like, maybe I can do that too. Perhaps that could be me. You know, it's that optimism.
And hope goes a long way.
100%. That's why I think I'm still here.
Ralph, you have a lot of friends in the Thal community, you know, and you've had a journey. You're, you know, a trailblazer in this community. What is it like seeing, you know, people with Thal from so many different places of life come together? You know, what's the impact of that?
So it's funny that you call me a trailblazer. It just kind of means I'm old. No.
Very sorry.
To me, it just amazes me because growing up and going to clinic, and I went to a clinic where there were a lot of Thal patients, but I never felt like I fit in because I wasn't getting transfused regularly. So not only was I not fitting in with quote unquote normal, you know, my normal friends, I wasn't fitting in with the Thal community. So I kind of separated myself, and I just did what I had to do, go to hospital. You know, they would back then when I was going to clinic, if I was a 7 or above, they wouldn't transfuse me. So I was maintaining my count between 7 and 9 all the time. So I didn't know any other way. It wasn't until I got older, like in my 20s, where I actually started needing blood. So it was difficult because, number one, like I said, I was going to clinic, and I heard people talking to my mom like, "Oh, don't bother, you know, with the braces," because I had braces. "Don't bother with the braces. He's not going to live long enough." So this was the parents' attitude that were in that room while we were waiting to be seen by the doctor or you know, to get my labs done. And so, you know, I kind of never did fit in with the clique. And then all of a sudden, I became president of the foundation. It was just a journey. It was a promise I made to a friend that we were actually doing a study together, and we were in the hospital for 28 days, and she asked me, "Why don't you get involved with the group, with the Thalassemia group?" And I was like, I never really fit in with them other than you. You know, I mean, I say hello to everybody. Everybody, you know, we were friends, quote unquote friends, but I didn't hang out with them like they did every 2 weeks. I didn't go out to dinner with them or out to lunch. So it was, you know, it was her, and she's like, "Well, you're definitely one of us, you know, and now that you're getting transfused," and I met more people, and I you know, sat side by side in a chair, dripping blood, you know, she's like, "You really should get involved." And I said, "I will when I'm ready." And, you know, so we spent 28 days in the hospital, and then a year or so later, she passed, and I never got involved. So I said, I owe her something, and I got involved. And just like things happen in my life, I went to my first meeting, which was TAG at the time. It was the Thalassemia Action Group. It was basically the Colasanti Foundation funded patient group for patient support. So I go to this TAG meeting, and they're like, "We just voted you vice president." I'm like, "How the heck did that happen?" You know, and I didn't know, like, I've been to TAG conferences, because before the foundation did the conference, TAG used to do the conference. It's funny because I feel there's some patients my age who may be jealous of that or look at that and say, "Well, we didn't have those opportunities." But to me, it's like, that's what I lived for. I lived to give others those opportunities because and again, that was probably instilled with me from my mom, because she volunteered me for every study there was, because she was looking, you know, to sustain my life or anything that they told her. You know, I did a green tea study. I drank green tea for like months because it was supposed to break down the iron. And I was like, you know, I just remember my mom saying, "Oh yeah, you're going to help others. You have a purpose." So I think just her giving me that purpose, you know, is really why I'm still here. I didn't think I'd be married. I didn't think I'd have kids. Definitely didn't plan on grandchildren. So like Radhika said, we live day to day. And I think that's that's the other thing with having this illness is that when you're born and diagnosed, you're immediately thinking about dying. Like, everybody goes through life knowing that someday it's going to end, but you don't think about it every day. I literally thought about it every day. Is this going to be the day? When I showed up at clinic and I saw my friends weren't in their normal chair, I knew that something happened. I knew that they weren't there. So, we lost friends along the way, but I just said, I have a purpose. I don't know what the purpose is, but hopefully I'm fulfilling it, and hopefully I'll live long enough to see my grandchildren graduate high school. I was always hoping to just see my children graduate high school. Now, I have bigger hopes, and I think that's the key word, is hopes. And I'm very, very excited about new technologies and things that are coming to help all our patients along the way, where right now thalassemia just becomes a major inconvenience versus a death sentence.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think that's a great change. I remember thalassemia used to be considered a fatal disease of childhood. Now it is considered a chronic disease. And that little switch in the language is huge. It's huge. The fact that I remember asking some of the top hematologists the other day, I said, so what is the average lifespan? Like, what is not the average lifespan, excuse me. What is the life expectancy today of a thalassemic? He's like, normal. And I'm like, I'm sorry, what? He said, with proper care and management, your lifespan is projected to be the same as another person. And I was like, wow, that's not something our parents ever thought would be there. But now it's here, and that's great. And now there's different options for cures, and treatment's better, and quality of life is improving.
Exactly. And we're talking about it. I think that's the biggest thing, is more people are knowing that thalassemia is because we're talking about it. Yeah. And I wish the medical database or insurance database would catch up so that they could give life insurance to thalassemia patients, because it's a normal life now. And it's something I'm trying to work on myself, because I think it's insane that we get discriminated against, for get rated for life insurance, when if you're treated properly, your life expectancy is normal now, right? It's not 19, it's not 17, it's not
26.
Yeah. And I think the key, like you said, is talking about it.
Yep.
And like we touched on, it's not always easy, but I think that's what, really empowers us. Radhika, you mentioned, you started out in your journey very isolated, slowly made friends. And now, I feel like you're a mover and a shaker in this community. When did you decide to embrace Thal instead of fight it?
I decided to actually share my story, other than actually for the first time openly, when I was in graduate school. So high school, no one knew. In college, the only people that knew were my roommates, because I had to explain to them why I had needles and syringes for my death roll, and I didn't want them to think I was a druggie. So I had to tell them, and I wanted them to know when I would disappear for transfusions. So that was maybe over the course of college, maybe 8 people that knew. But then I went to graduate school for genetic counseling. And part of the reason I went to that is because I realized my parents didn't even understand the recessive nature of thalassemia, and were so shocked when they had me, another child with thalassemia, that they didn't realize the 1 in 4 happens with every pregnancy. So I went into this field, and something just, learning about all these genetic conditions and learning about what the natural course of different conditions were, kind of sparked something in me. And I'm like, I learned about thalassemia, and I learned about it, and it was very minimal what they talked about it with. And I'm like, well, it's not really giving a good perspective of what it's like to live with this. And so I went to our program director, and I had written actually in my application about having thalassemia as a way to get in. I'm like, well, maybe this can finally be a benefit. Maybe I can use it to my advantage to get into graduate school. So obviously it worked. I got in, and I asked her, I said, do you think I can share my story with my classmates? And she's like, absolutely. So I remember I was so scared, but I just felt like I needed to share. And so there was about 20 people in my my class. There's 20 people in the class ahead of me because it's a 2-year program. And she got them all together and said, we have a special guest speaker. And my husband showed up from work to just support me. So they're all thinking he's talking. And he's a finance guy. They're like, are we getting a lecture on finances and genetics? You know? And then I walk in front of the class and everyone's looking like, are you introducing him? And I start sharing my story. And it was complete silence in the room. And then I start crying and I'm telling them. But it was the most cathartic thing because afterwards they came up to me and they're like, wow, we never even knew you were going through this whole time. You're so strong and, you know, we're amazed and thank you so much for sharing. And then I started getting phone calls and emails of people sharing their stories and their journeys. Like, oh, I never told anybody this, but I have this, or I donated eggs to someone, or I'm this. And I'm like, wow, everybody has a story. And it made me realize that they now, first of all, no one in my class, the class above me, has any questions about thalassemia. And they're always like, no, you can survive with this condition. They know how to counsel it, but now they always think about what is it like for the patient who gets diagnosed with this condition, you know? And it gave them a different perspective and a different empathy. And we relate to each other. And it just, they get it. And I realized this is what I was missing my whole life. I wish I had had that support. And then I'm like, you know what? Maybe I should keep doing this and tell people it's okay to share your story. You know, people will more times than not be more supportive than they'll be unsupportive. And that's been my experience. And I realize now the more we share, the more we break these stigmas and people stop being so frightened about what they don't know and ask questions. And no one ever has asked me a question that I found offensive. And it gave them the strength to realize it's okay to open up to people. It's okay to ask questions if you're like, I don't understand what you're going through. Can you tell me? And you support each other. And I'm glad I did it. And as I got more open about it, I asked my parents, said, are you going to be okay if I do this? And they said, you know, as long as your husband and their family also are okay with this, that's fine. Because we want to just make everybody happy. And I'm not regretted telling people now. And I more regret, you can't undo the past. I get why my dad was so scared. But I think even he sees the benefits of sharing. Because now I feel like you give hope to people and you build more understanding and you break down that stigma. That just because you have a diagnosis, you can't live a normal life. Yes, you can. You can do a lot more things. You can do the same stuff. You just may need maybe you need some accommodations. Maybe you need a little more time. Maybe you need a little more understanding or flexibility. But it can be done. So
that's beautiful, Radhika. Thank you so much for sharing that. Thank you. So powerful. I just want to ask Erick, you said you recently connected with the Thal community. How have you felt empowered by them?
I feel more, there's a lot of hope. There's more hope now. For many years, I just felt secluded and stuff. And it's just, I don't know. It's, I never wanted to share my story. I just didn't want people to hear about it, I guess. I didn't want them, of course, I didn't think I was weak or anything. But now, having treatment and everything, I lived my life till the 30s, because I thought I was going to pass away anyways, you know. My sister passed away at 36. So she's 9 years older than me. And I was like, you know what? I'll be next. I'm going to be next. So I just lived my life to the fullest when I was in my 30s. And then now when I have new treatment, I'm in my 40s now. And it's giving me a lot more hope, where I can live until 100 or, you know, I can live longer now. You know, I'm not going to die. I'm not going to die if I keep on doing my regimen, my routine and everything, stay healthy and everything, that I'm going to be here forever, you know, basically. But it's empowered me a lot more now. I feel more invincible. Sharing my story with others, knowing that I'm going to live longer. I feel a lot better now. Just sharing, just meeting other thalassemia patients and sharing with others. I don't know. I think I had a barrier up. I was always quiet. I was a quiet person all the time. But now just speaking up speaking up to other people and just letting people hear my story, it does empower you a lot more. Yeah, especially when you get feedback, you're like, okay, this is okay. They don't think anything different of me, And then there's some people that can actually really relate to me, and it could help others too. Yeah. And at this point, that's what I would really want to do, is just help the next generation to know that, what, we're here, and that we can live for a long time, and you guys can too.
Those were literally the words I said to
Exactly.
a young girl yesterday.
Yeah.
I saw her, and then she started crying. She's like, I really needed to hear that. And I'm like, I'm glad I could share. We could keep passing it down.
Yep. And that's the power of connection. I think, the fact that, all of the Thal community is so diverse in so many ways, but we are so similar and have so much in common, and uniting those forces allows us to be lifted and in turn be empowered and bring awareness and break those stigmas, shatter them. So I want to thank you guys so much for being on. This has been an incredible conversation. Thank you to all our listeners for joining us on this episode. Don't forget to like and share, subscribe, and join us next time.